Hello, comrades and not what the fuck did I try and do? There's no female version of comrade as far as I'm aware.
Comrades
Anyway,
and cadres.
comrades and cadres, I am here with the obnoxious anarchist, great anarchist YouTuber and activist himself, and I have brought him on to interview him today.
So yeah, my YouTube channel is called The Obnoxious Anarchist. Please go subscribe, all that stuff. That's it. Yeah, I just use the platform to talk about building class consciousness, dispelling myths within the socialist circles, if you want to call it that. All the various colors, the communists, the anarchists, and all that shit. And I just try essentially to build that's it, some kind of real class consciousness. That's really what I want to do.
Question one: how did you become a leftist?
How did I become a leftist?
Yeah.
Well, for me, radical politics was always like a big part of my life. I'd say since the age of like 14, 15, and it's very stereotypical. I started with like the whole punk scene and all that shit, and like especially in Montreal, the punk scene is extremely left wing. We have like a very big like anti-fascist presence here in Montreal, communist presence, anarchist. It goes back and stuff like that. So that definitely had like had an effect. But yeah, I mean, like just growing up in this fucking the colonial capitalist hellhole that we call Canada, and having to go to these like elementary schools that they just force obedience and stuff like that. For me, it was just kind of natural, and with the help of like certain teachers and stuff like that, I was able to like develop my ideas more. And as time went on, I became more and more radical and militant. So that's about it.
The relentless social conditioning that we go through on a nearly daily basis. Jesus Christ.
That's it. And I think that's a real big spark in terms of what radicalizes people generally, is just their lived experiences, the material conditions that they're forced to have to deal with, for sure.
I used to be like one of those on CSJW. Like, I went from being a TYT watcher, like sock them lib type, started watching TJ Kirk, and eventually ended up watching like, what's his name? No Bullshit, that guy.
Who? Oh, No Bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who said that a white nationalist was much more polite than this Jewish guy who was shitting on him for talking to white nationalists.
Yeah, fuck your respectability politics.
No, yeah, my favorite thing is that he was like, well, like, you realize that if he like. You have an Asian wife, and like he would totally say that like you are a degenerate for race mixing, like, and he was like, well, he was respectful, and you know
what the fuck.
The reason I stopped watching him was because he said that there is no art that was ever made in Africa that was worth something to be put in a museum, and that immediately was like, wait, what?
Yeah, like what the fuck?
Like that shit snapped me out of it. Then, like, the thing is, even before that, I always, like, I was kind of a semi-racist, actually, no, full-on kind of racist, suck them, because I was never a fan of, like, liberal economics, just generally, because it fucked over me and my family. Sure. But, like, I snapped out of that and then just slowly started descending into what I am now. Ascending,
that's
not
it.
descending.
Ascending, that's right.
How did you? What made you an anarchist?
So that's the thing. I would say that like I gravitated towards anarchism just because I was exposed to it first, and definitely like when we're talking about things like nationalism or certain conceptualizations of the state, especially vis-a-vis living in a colonial state like Canada, the United States, and stuff like that, like. So yeah, I was against these things. I was anti-nationalist based on the fact that I was against Canada. I was against this nation, you know what I mean? But it was later on that I started to realize that like not all states are equal, not all nations are equal, and stuff like that. So and it comes from like a really like a place that from like that we look at nations and we look at states really from this like white paradigm and stuff like that. And then as I started getting into that, I got more and more into communism. But I was reading like small books on Fidel Castro, little books on Karl Marx all through high school, because I had a couple of teachers that would like would like basically like give me this material as like extracurricular shit because they saw that I was interested in politics. So for me, yeah, I got into anarchism first, but I do want to make it clear here that like I personally focus way more on the similarities between anarchists and communists because they are both from the tradition of socialism, and they're you know, it's very productive to talk about the similarities when everybody's talking about the differences all the time.
You know, I've also this is because I used to like be weird about anarchists mainly because I was a Vosh watcher
Yeah.
for a while, and as I slowly like started to realize that he's a bit of a like arsehole, a massive arsehole. Like it turned me off of anarchism. But the thing is that like eventually, like as I just started to like go re-gravitating towards like watching anarchists, it just like it made me realize we are not in the time where like we are relevant enough to be having the Lenin fucking the Lenin Makhno split or the fucking Bakunin Marx split. We do not have that level of success.
Yeah, for sure. Like, we're nowhere near even setting up some kind of an international in which we could like first we need to like carve out the space so that we can have these kinds of debates, because I don't mind having debates with like with other leftists and shit. I think that it can be productive. I don't I personally don't like having debates with right-wingers because throughout my whole 30 years of life, it's shown me that to be unproductive, completely unproductive.
So how would you say being a leftist in Canada differs from being a leftist in other places? Like what material conditions you feel changes?
Well, it for sure depends on the place. When we're talking about being a leftist in the colonial core, you know, it's a lot easier for us to be leftists because we have all of our needs like pretty much met, even though a lot of us are like, well, okay, I'll talk about for me personally, you know, like everything is here. Did we benefit from the white privilege? We benefit from the primitive accumulation of colonialism. And even those of us that are like, you know, like you could even say like people who are the most vulnerable, homeless people and stuff like that. You know, that like a homeless person in Canada is probably doing a little bit more well off than a homeless person in, let's say, Bangladesh or something like that.
Or something. Yeah.
So that informs like white leftists need to understand that is a part of the way that our communism and our socialism is conceived by the places that we live in and stuff like that. Now, and yeah, so that's okay. How would it be? How would it be different from anywhere else in the colonized world? I don't really think there are any differences, to be honest.
I mean, I generally see a similarity in our country with the like social democratic faction being like in America, seeing as I consider America the most right-wing country in the world. That's myself. And in that, like, even Brazil has a healthcare system, even if it's getting for lack of a better term, cooked. Like, and I feel like the DSA types in America, there are a lot more committed social democrats that are willing to fight, mainly because they don't even have those like marginal changes, which I feel gives America a slight advantage in converting people to a more radical position.
Well, yeah. So when the conditions are at their hottest, that's when you can have that bubbling over and stuff like that. And yeah, Canada definitely is like that. Our government is it's like the same with the Democrats, with the liberals here. That's where movements go to die.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah. So in Canada, we have like this sense that we're all polite and everybody's nice to each other and everything's kind of good and fucking kumbaya and shit like that. But it's not. You know, we're a colonial genocidal state, colonial capitalist, white supremacist, and patriarchal, just like the rest of them. You know.
Oh yeah, 100%. So, what do you feel like Marxists or like Marxist-Leninists can learn from anarchism that you feel like that we generally aren't informed about?
Right. So I think that anarchists can learn from Marxists, and I think Marxists can learn.
That was going to be my next question. What do you think anarchists can learn from Marxists?
Okay, so I'll start with what Marxists can learn from anarchists. I mean, definitely, you know, there like all the socialist projects that have happened and that are currently happening around the world. So we could talk about the USSR, China, DPRK,
Cuba.
Cuba, all these things. Yeah, we got to look at them as very nuanced and shit like that. And so, yeah, what could Marxists learn from anarchists? I think that our critique of the state is very important, because if we're gonna capture a state and just keep it as is, and just use the same kind of structures and formulas that the bourgeois state has used, then we cease to become anything different than the bourgeois state itself. So I think that, like, yeah, we need more like associations, assemblies, more of a more of a bottom-up approach with horizontal.
More of a top-down approach from an anarchist.
No.
That was a Freudian. That was a Freudian.
Like, so that's it. And like, when we're talking about state and stuff like that, it's important first that we define what we mean by the state, because it changes from thinker to thinker, and it's changed over time. So like, I think that's where a lot of like this argument comes from. And on the other side, you know, anarchists are like, as soon as you hear something like words like state or nation, it's like they recluse into themselves and they can't. But then when you ask them, okay, well, how would you organize, let's say, defending the revolution, or how would you organize, you know, spreading Medicare and food to large amounts of people? You know, this to some degree takes central planning. You know what I mean? Yeah. The projects that we want to get done is to create power. So how do you create power? You can either do it by seizing state structures, and by creating like outside of the state and stuff like that. You know,
building dual power.
Exactly, building dual power and shit like that.
Like, I get what you're saying about like just people thinking that seizing like the means, or like the Communist Party being in charge, it necessarily means that the state is proletarian. Mm-hmm. Like, Shay actually talked about the fact that like Khrushchev disassociating the need for like the like proletarian consciousness to be developed alongside the economic system, mm-hmm. he feels was a big failing of the USSR, and that we need to raise public consciousness along with the economic thing, because they aren't detached, they are very closely linked. And this is just from our social analysis ourselves as like Marxists or anarchists.
I really think that we do need to focus on the social factors. A lot of the problems in the USSR was like, you know, with things considering patriarchy and shit like that, or fucking, you know, policies that supported homophobia and shit like that. So like, all these things kind of have to happen together. It's not just the economic alone. If it stands alone like that, it'll just end up becoming tyrannical in some kind of other way. You can even just look at even before the USSR, the state that they had captured said that homosexuality, sodomy was illegal. So they captured the state, then they said, okay, well, we're not like, it wasn't really like enforced. But then when Stalin signed the new USSR constitution, he put in those anti-sodomy laws as well. But yeah, it's a different time and a different place. Like, the material conditions back then were very different, dude. Like, there was no feminism and shit like that, especially in fucking in the USSR, in that area. You know, it's still very, very Christian and shit like that. So times are different now.
I mean, there were actually quite a few, like, but they were marginalized. But like, especially the wives of certain revolutionaries, or certain people who even took part in the revolutionary movement, started Marxist feminism and stuff like that. So how did you become a YouTuber then?
Oh yeah, well, so some shit happened. I was working, and then like I had to go on like disability leave because I was having like a lot of like mental health issues and shit like that. So at some point, dude, I was just like, honestly, in a place where I felt like I really couldn't communicate with anybody about my political ideologies. And like, I'm surrounded by people and stuff like that, but I don't know, man. I felt like kind of like talk about stuff and it was kind of just going over people's heads a lot of the time. So I was bored, pissed off, didn't know what to do with my time and shit like that. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to start journaling like some of my ideas. And that's how it started with the short video essays and stuff like that. I would kind of just like write out an outline that I would write for an essay and then make a short video out of it and stuff like that. So for me, it's just, honestly, it's just a pastime. I really like doing it. And I want to build community, you know?
Yeah. Do you think that there is a actually existing socialism in the world, like any socialist place in the world? Like,
yeah, of course. I mean, I do view Cuba as as socialist. I definitely do view China as socialist. I view a lot of, and you have to understand that like
interesting. I don't.
Every single, but like here, let me explain. Like I believe that there are like socialist strains that can kind of like be weaved in and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that like the world is under a capitalist hegemony. So there's no way that you can just like in an instant snap your fingers and have capitalism. It's way more complicated than that. And especially China, who came from like you know, very most of the people living in poverty. You know, one of the things you have to do before people can emancipate themselves is fucking feed them. So that is a part of the socialist project. And now I do have critiques of China, of course. I'm not saying that they're like this perfect socialist utopia, but yeah, my heart hopes that they're pushing into that direction where they can emancipate and you know, bring full communism.
Yeah. My statement isn't whether I think that it is necessary to gain economic thing to feed the people. It's whether they're actually doing that and feeding the people, which is the questions I have.
Yeah,
is the main thing, because like some of the statistics I see aren't good, but like some of the statistics I see are. So like, and I have massive problems with China that like and massive things, but like I generally think it's a progressive nation is generally what I say. I think it's a nation that is generally progressive on the world stage, and that's mainly what's important in like being in the imperialist core. Like if like people who don't consider that. Oh, hey Paul Morin, sorry,
hey, Paul.
like shit, solidarity, comrade. But I was just like, if people in China don't feel like it's socialist enough and need to strip, like people in China and the surrounding areas that are kind of fucked by China are the main people who need to identify the class structure of the nation.
But what areas are being fucked by China? Because certain like areas would be fucked, especially if they're not like leaning towards the socialist policies and shit like that. So yeah, we would gotta talk about specifics.
Yeah, we would have to talk specifics, which I'm not ready to do.
I hear you. I don't know much about China either. Me, I'm just trying to say that like I'm not one of these people who thinks that, oh, just because like some people, they look at China and the reason that they could never bring it to themselves to say that, oh, maybe there are socialist aspects to this and stuff like that is just simply because they're racist.
I would definitely say that it's a country with like proletarian ethics and like the social conditioning is generally what I would say is socialist. Whether whether the economy or structure is generally the worrying thing I see. But anyway, to the next question. Thoughts on why the like Marxist anarchist divide still persists, even though it's not as like, even though we aren't as much of a political force as we are in the given countries we're in.
So like I will tell you that honestly for me, because I got into like activism in real life before I got into YouTube, and this fucking anarchist and communist divide like really it kind of only really exists on YouTube, because when I was organizing in real life, like we were just working with Marxists and anarchists. We're just working together. It wasn't like this fucking thing. And like sometimes we'll have like talks about like the state and stuff like that, but really at the end of the day we put that shit aside and we work together to get those things that we need to get done. So why does it persist today? It persists because people like shitting on each other. People don't know how to deal with conflict management. People are emotionally immature, and don't forget that there's also a very big interest in the status quo and the bourgeois state for us to be divided. It's very, very, very good for them. So don't be surprised that these motherfuckers have operations that are trying to actively divide us. Because a divided left is a conquered left.
Oh, yeah. You know, I feel like it does come from a very online mentality. And, like, I'd recommend anybody who is hyper-fixated on that divide to just go out on the street and talk to street anarchists. Because like, I don't have to mention the V word or the X word to, like, know who I'm talking about, you know, when I talk about online online people who like aren't really like aren't doing anarchist praxis.
Yeah. And me, what I do honestly, dude, is if somebody tells me they're a communist or they're an anarchist, it doesn't matter. I don't automatically assume that they're my comrade, because a lot of people that call themselves anarchists certainly are not. Like they certainly have no idea even what they're talking about. And when you really get down to the nitty gritty and you ask some of these anarchists, okay, well, how do we organize revolution? How do we build these power structures and shit like that? And like, you know, you'll have good ones that say, you know, we have tactics like syndicalism, direct action. There's a bunch of shit. You could then you go on the communists and you could say, no, we need to create a third party. We need a vanguard party and shit like that. We need, you know, and like both are valuable to me anyway.
Favorite leftist writers?
I like Malatesta, but like at the same time, like you have to understand, I don't really read a lot of books and shit like that. Honestly, like the way that I educate myself is more more based on the line of like, you know, how like universities and shit like that, you read peer-reviewed articles and stuff like that, and I think that's great. But like, yeah, I've read Malatesta. I like Gramsci a lot. So like a lot of the, like, I'm Italian, so I'm incredibly influenced by the Italian culture of socialism, anti-fascism, anarchism, and stuff like that. Also, I'm very influenced by the French. The French anti-fascist and communist, because, you know, I live in Quebec, so it's very, very influenced by France, you know what I mean?
What is the principles of communism, of like anarchism, where it's like, this is easy to read and you'll get the premise?
Yeah, so you can read the Anarcho-Syndicalism Theory and Practice by Rudolf Rocker. You can read Conquest of Bread. Anything by Emma Goldman is amazing. Like, Emma Goldman was one of my favorites for sure. Voltaire de Cleyre, if you want a little bit more of that like poetry type shit. Louise Michel writing in France. So there's tons. And there's tons from those days, and there's tons of anarchists today. If you really want to get a sense of the best aspects of anarchism today, check out Indigenous Anarchism. There's I think there's like a Twitter page called Indigenous Anarchist Federation. You should check them out.
I think I'm following. Also, there was a what are they called? Rev Left Radio episode with the Indigenous Anarchist Federation.
Nice.
And I've not watched that specific episode, but like the Rev Left podcast is fantastic.
Yeah. I love Brett and I love Rev Left. Yeah, I used to like work. I just, without giving too many details about my life there, I used to work in a hospital. You know what I mean? So like, I used to just walk around listening to fucking podcasts all day. Yeah, I love Rev Left. I love Brett, and I love the Red Menace too.
Problems with the left. I think like problems with the current state of the left.
Well, we don't have any power. This is one of the main problems. Like we could keep pointing at each other and say like, this is the problem, that's the problem, but yo, we just don't have any fucking power, and it's really, really hard to build power in a condition where the people who have power are oppressing you completely, like repressing and oppressing your ideas vehemently, and at times, when need be, violently. So yeah, how to like, fuck, there's those problems, yeah, and also just like lack of education, of course. Like, you know, people are going to school and they're like kind of, you know, learning about socialism on their own free time, so it's very easy to get like, you know, some really bad information, especially on YouTube or elsewhere on the internet and stuff like that. And like, you know, I've taken political science classes and they really don't explain in a way that's satisfactory to me anyway what socialism is and stuff like this. So yeah, like education's a main problem, and building power, I think, really is the biggest thing. And
I also think we are too easy to get COINTELPRO'd. Like, yeah. I am a first believer in democratic centralism as well as like state socialism, and I have strong convictions on that. However, I do feel in the modern context, organizations need to federalize more.
Yeah.
They need to be able to, like, if you arrest the leaders of one branch, you aren't necessarily able to arrest the leaders of another branch.
But that's right. We need to remain flexible in that sense. And by doing that is that you empower the most amount of people to be able to not not go and take up leadership positions, but to assume leadership characteristics that are not harmful to people. Just because you have some people are just more charismatic. You can use that charisma to make people do bad things, or you can use that charisma to make people do things that would be like socially beneficial for people that are suffering the most in our society.
Yeah. So let's see. Things we can do to help with that. I guess we partially covered it. Like
things that we could do. Oh fuck! There's tons of things we could do. Yeah. Like you said, building.
Join a union. Join a party. Like
join a union. Fuck. Start bring. Dude, there's a lot of ununionized labor.
Jesus Christ! Especially if you live in the U.S., especially even Canada's slightly better on that shit, and it's still not good.
It's slightly better, but the problem here, and I don't shit on unions. I think that a union is better than no unions, right? But what happens here in Canada is the positions that end up being unionized are usually state workers, so hospitals or hospital workers or
same here.
Yeah, so what ends up happening there is that there ends up becoming a little bit of what I would call the aristocracy of labor. You have people who are comfortable in their positions. They get paid a little bit more than other people do. They have better benefits and shit like that. So what ends up happening is that what starts to foment in these workplaces is a very reactionary politic.
Yeah.
In which they want to keep their position as this aristocracy of labor. They're unionized. They don't have to worry. They don't want to go outside of their comfort zone to do shit in solidarity for workers who are not unionized and shit like that. The working class, it is very divided. And there were times in history where, even with the IWW and shit like that the white working class would take certain concessions given to them by the bourgeois state at the expense of the black working class. And yeah, we need to look at those kinds of things. And especially today, I start to see a lot of workers want to marginalize trans people. Why? They want to marginalize trans people because they think that the working class doesn't support transness. And then you're going down some slippery fucking roads over there.
Supporting people being dipshit reactionaries when most of the population agree, that's tailism. That's tailing the masses. You're supposed to be with the masses, and sometimes pushing them forward to not be reactionary and fight against their own interests in the grand scheme. Also with unions, Carr, the black activist guy, great guy. Fucking, I love his content.
Same here.
He was talking about the police unions, and police unions are reactionary as shit. And the truth is, they will get whatever they want, because who's gonna break the strikes are the strike breakers. Nobody.
That's it. And I do want to make one distinction here, is that yes, they do have a union, but they're not workers. So
no, and they specifically say they're not trade unions.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, they try and say that they're councils or for advocates and not trade unions, because they have drastically been opposed to trade unions historically, so they can't really try and squeeze themselves in when people bust it.
Yeah.
Plug your channel and I'll plug mine.
All right, yeah, YouTube, the Obnoxious Anarchist, check it out. I got all kinds of fucking content over there. Go check it out. Have fun. Yeah, that's the thing. Hey, but let me tell you, I'll definitely get obnoxious if I talk to fucking cop sympathizers and shit like that. Don't worry.
He's a real anarchist, that's why. Yeah, true. So yeah, please like and subscribe, hit the bell, because I want subscriptions to work like they goddamn used to back in the old days. I would like if it actually was a subscription and not just you get random bullshit if we feel like it.
I agree. Hey, thanks so much for having me, and it was nice to see everybody in chat, yo.